that account in your book, you give obviously a little bit of a condensed version of what Carl and his wife went through. But that account is absolutely striking. It's very strange, as the name of your book that we're going to talk about here shortly. But there seems to be some commonalities in the threads of that story. I know he was on that UFO podcast with Andy, and he told the story there. But to me, that account, there's things in that account that I've heard before. And it was very, very unusual. Andy, welcome back to the show. I wanted to start off by I want to talk about the book Strange. And before we do that, can you just tell everybody real quickly your introduction into the paranormal and how you got fascinated by this?
Yeah, so I've been involved with this kind of thing for, 34 years now. And as some people will know, it began for me looking into crop circles and UFOs and that whole world. That was my entry to this. And then I found myself being asked to give talks about it to community groups and whatever. And then people started to ask me to write about it. And before I knew it, I was talking to more and more people in the world who were interested in the paranormal. And then what you discover is that more and more people come forward with their stories and they'll share things with you that maybe they wouldn't with anybody else or their next door neighbor. But, when they've seen me up there making a fool of myself, being open about this, they're going to feel safe. So they come up and they share these tales. And I just began to realize some of these are so extraordinary. I really should be writing them down or getting these people to write them down for me. And so, over the last few years, I've been gathering properly all this stuff that I've been hearing for 3 decades plus, and trying to say to the world, look, we should be talking about this. We put a lid on it all the time and pretend it isn't going on, but it is, and it can't all be easily explained. So what Strange is trying to do is to say, basically, this is happening. Let's actually look at it. Let's accept the skeptics are over there. What if they're wrong? What could this mean if they are wrong? And, how can we explain this? Looking at everything from multidimensionality to quantum research, the whole world that we're now beginning to realize that it is not what we thought it was. And look that in the eye and say, well, that's going to explain many paranormal encounters. So, it's been a really exciting project to work on. And it's got a lot of new material out there that had never been shared before. So I'm now trying to just get the conversations going, saying, talk about your weird experiences because this is happening here and now.
You mentioned the skeptics, and that's obviously, a huge part of these conversations. You have people over there that are known skeptics, and they come from a standpoint that this is all BS and that there's nothing to see here. But then there's like another aspect of that, which is like active disinformation and people that are obfuscating the truth. Do you think mainstream science suppresses this? Do you think that there's other hands at play here that actively suppress stories like this for whatever reason?
Mm. I mean, I've written about conspiracies before, and now clearly I do think there are some programs out there that do want to keep down certain information. Whether that explains the way the mainstream media treats this kind of thing is another matter. I mean, there is a difference also between the British media and the American media. Now, I know you've got a little bit more open-mindedness there, especially towards the whole UAP stroke UFO subject. Over here, though, our media's still very dyed-in-the-wool skepticism. They really don't want to be persuaded that there is anything to look at. And I think that some of what sometimes therefore looks like a conspiracy of silence or to keep something down is actually just an innate habit that I think they've got into and they don't want to kick, and nobody wants to admit they've been wrong. And so I think that's why they don't give fair coverage to people that do believe the paranormal should be looked at properly. So, I'm not ruling out that there are programs out there holding certain stuff down, because clearly I think in the UAP world that's definitely true. But, on a broader level, I think there's just an entrenched resistance to going there, because the day they go there, and this is true for scientists as well, they've got to change everything they've been teaching all this time. They don't want to do that. They've got the world. They know they're in control of it, that they don't want that lid to come off, because suddenly people are going to go, well, hang on, if you were wrong about this, you must be wrong about this and this too. And of course, that's their worst nightmare.
Yeah. And one of these other things you do so well in the book, and for anybody listening, we're talking about Annie's new book called Strange. And in it, you weave together a lot of different aspects of the paranormal, the psychic phenomenon, UFOs, obviously, folklore, spiritual mysteries. What sort of unifying threads are you seeing like through all of these? What sort of commonality and tropes do you see?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I should stress is that what the book isn't, it's not a staccato series of separate stories. And what you discover as you read through is a narrative unfolds, and you begin to realize that what looks separate. So you've got ghosts being seen there, very common, by the way. You've got people having out of body experiences over there. Then you've got people over there seeing UFOs and meeting aliens and undergoing some level of psychic phenomena. And as the book goes on, you begin to realize there's actually quite a big crossover between all of this. And therefore, you realize that maybe these things are not entirely separate, that you've got realms out there, you've got these multi dimensions that we keep hearing about from the science world, but they never want to talk about what might actually exist there. What if that is now crossing over into our world? Maybe it always has been, but we're now realizing that. So you've got a mixture of entities passing through these different layers of reality, and we christen them, angels or aliens or ghosts, and maybe they are sometimes those things, but equally maybe there's something that's more fluid than that, taking on different forms to different people. So it gets really fascinating. By the time you get to the end of the book, you begin to realize, okay, this all joins up in the middle. And I mean, if you just take, the whole UFO world at the moment, that's really changed in the last 20 years, even more recently than that, where there's now more of an understanding that consciousness plays a big role in this. It isn't just about nuts and bolts. There's something here that goes a lot deeper than that, which is useful because that then crosses people over into looking in general at more esoteric realms that, I think have been a little bit sidelined, even in some paranormal research over the years.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are definitely common threads with all of these different things, and I've heard, one of the seasoned UFO researchers, Grant Cameron, has talked about this, is how the phenomenon has evolved. It was doing this back in the 50s and 60s, and then, then like the UFOs, like the actual structured UFOs was
Yeah.
changing, and then the crop circle phenomenon took off. Even though we have a great book by Terry Wilson, The Secret History of Crop Circles, that it was probably going back further, but there's these moments in time over the last, let's just say 100 years, where it seems like the overall phenomenon of the paranormal has had its day in 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 the forefront of consciousness of human beings for whatever reason that is. And the crop circle phenomenon, I definitely want to talk to you about that because that's an interest of mine. That may be an even bigger part of this next question I have is that one of the things you're arguing is that like the catalyst for personal and societal transformation can be these conversations. Can confronting these stuff and looking at it really truly shift the collective consciousness, and how much of that do you think is actually happening right now?
Well, I think if enough people do it, then it will, yes. And it's going to take a bit of bravery. I mean, I opened the book Strange by just describing a few of the times when I've been assailed by skeptics at talks. And they'll get up and they'll rant and they'll rave and accuse me of being mad and deranged and I'm a nutter and all the usual things. And what you see in their eyes is they're so afraid. They are so afraid that they might be even slightly wrong, that what they have to do is just destroy. They must crush all dissent. And we see a lot of that. But if the whole room got up and all said, hang on a minute, but I've had that happen to me too, or whatever, and I have been present when other people have then defended me, so well, hold on a minute. You begin to see this other side coming up, but they get bullied into silence too often. So on a societal level, people who experience the strange, yeah, they are basically held down by fear. And they fear ridicule, they fear their careers being damaged or whatever. But I do sense what's happening now is, and especially since, we've had the congressional hearings on UAP and all that, and I know there's a long way to go with that yet, but people are beginning to think, okay, why shouldn't I talk out about this? Why should these other people just tell me that I'm mad because I've experienced something that maybe they haven't? And I think there is a resistance coming in. There's a long way to go yet, but I think there is a movement's too strong, but I do think there is a flow now where people are fed up with all the skeptics and the mainstream scientism proponents rather than science, which, is a good thing technically, but scientism, they're fed up with them basically saying, thou shalt not discuss this. And that's no way forward anymore. And of course, since social media came in, and people now are not reliant on the old single platforms and normal TV or whatever, and they can now share this stuff. That's changed. I mean, just here in Britain in the last couple of weeks, they announced YouTube is now the most watched channel out of all the big TV channels. It's second only to the BBC. Well, how long before that crosses over? So people who are posting stuff up, and we know that YouTube is a little bit careful about what it allows there, yes, but nonetheless, there's certain conversations it has given space to that we would never have had before. So that's a big change as well, and I think that will go further.
Hey guys, if you've been watching this podcast for a while, then you already know. I'm absolutely fascinated by the crop circle phenomenon. It's one of those mysteries that keeps pulling me in deeper the more I explore it. That's why I'm really excited about a collaboration between shapesofwisdom.com and Curious Dimension podcast. Shapes of Wisdom is a sanctuary for seekers of ancient knowledge and sacred symbolism. They've curated an inspiring collection of sacred geometry and esoteric art that aligns beautifully with the themes we often explore here on Curious Dimension. On their website, shapesofwisdom.com, you'll find thousands of different crop circle designs. Yes, thousands. Available on posters, t-shirts, jewelry, even coloring books. Whether you're into meditative art, symbolic meaning, or just want to surround yourself with something a little otherworldly, it's an amazing resource. Shapes of Wisdom and Curious Dimension have come up with 4 different t-shirt designs that invite you to explore the unknown and wear your curiosity proudly. And as a special thank you to our listeners, you can get 15% off your Curious Dimension t-shirts and Shapes of Wisdom apparel clothing purchases by using the promo code Curious1 at checkout. That's CURIOUS1 at checkout. Plus, if you're into digital art or want access to some of the most stunning crop circle visuals, use promo code Curious2 for 40% off the crop circle collections and big picture digital files available through the Curious Dimension link on shapesofwisdom.com. I'll drop all the links and codes in the description below so you don't miss a thing. So if you're drawn to sacred geometry, ancient symbols, or just want to wear your curiosity, go check them out. Again, that's shapesofwisdom.com. Now let's dive back into today's episode. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, it's the media landscape has absolutely shifted here in the last decade. I mean, you have so many independent people just reporting the news on TikTok, Twitter, or now X, and then YouTube. And they have massive followings. They have millions of subscribers, and they get millions of views per show that sometimes they're uploading, 2 to 3 times a week. So it's not hard to see where people's attention span is being shifted towards. And yet, if those media channels don't pivot, they're going to become obsolete if they kind of haven't already.
Which is a good thing, of course. It may well be they've had their day, and it's time they admitted it. So that won't be a bad thing. As long as there's some balance out there, and you've got to allow all views, yes, in the end. But yeah, I think the old media platforms have had far too much sway for too long. But a point I make in the book is that they still try to be the gatekeepers for everyone. In their minds, they still are the big cheeses at the top. But I wonder if that's really the case anymore. And I think that there'll be a big way to fall for them when the day comes where they realize that isn't true anymore.
Yeah, I think some of them probably know that isn't true anymore, yet they're still hanging on by threads. And probably some of them are delusional and thinking that they still sort of hold the keys to the kingdom as far as what narratives get put out, what don't. But the market's just so saturated with other content creators, and the market dictates, right? And so everyone's just looking at these other channels. So yeah, I wanted to steer the conversation towards witness testimony because you have a lot of stories in your book, a lot of amazing stories in your book. How much weight should we put into witness testimony? Because we do have upcoming hearings coming up again. And the word on the street is that in these new congressional hearings that are supposedly September 9th, we're going to have first-hand whistleblowers, people that have touched UAP craft, UAP bodies, allegedly. How much weight and credibility when dealing with these wild subjects should we put into them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Now, I mean, obviously, when you're at the level of testifying in Congress, okay, there's the major agenda there. So the people there, we hope they're genuine, and the people testifying, they feel strongly they've got to get this out there. But that is an agenda, even if you agree with it, it's still an agenda. So they're going to come under a lot more scrutiny, of course, as to, well, are they just wanting us to believe this? The classic. What's fascinating with the people I've been talking to over the years, though, and they mostly make up what's in the book, is these are really everyday people with no agenda. They're not interested in the paranormal, or at least they weren't till they heard me speak. And then they will click and think, well, hang on, that thing that happened to me, that's what he's talking about. And then they come and they share. So they have no agenda other than they want to share with somebody something that happened to them. And that's where I find an incredible amount of authenticity. Because I'm well aware skeptics could say, well, they've all lied to you. There's no reason for these people to lie. There's no reason at all for them to make it up. They're not in Congress. They're not trying to testify. They just shared these stories. And many of them are in anonymously because I can't share all the names. Some are in there named and they've agreed to be named and they've written their own testimony. And so you got both. But in the end, right, if somebody is saying something to you that isn't true, you know it, right? You can pretty much feel it in the pit of your stomach. And when somebody's just sharing something that happened, and they've no idea that I'm going to go away and make anything of this information, you're just hearing like talking to somebody in the shop about what they did last week. You're just hearing it very naturally being shared. And I think that if everybody that had those kinds of conversations, was more willing to speak out about, that's again where I think it begins to change. Yeah, I mean, the minute you get to the level where somebody out there is trying to prove a point, they're going to get shot down more easily. And certainly with the congressional UAP hearings, the problem we've got now is it's really clear there's a major faction that's trying to squash that again. There was this sudden rise and the hope for immediate disclosure and all of this. And, for whatever reasons, much discussed, of course, you can feel that they just want to now zap that and discredit anybody that's saying that. So that's got to really, I think, quite fevered levels now. And that makes it harder to be sure what's going on. And yet, what I feel with all of that is there's no smoke without fire. So we might be questioning what we hear. I know, yeah, I'm going to be really interested to hear what the new witnesses say. But you get the feeling if this was nothing at all, it just wouldn't even have got this far. So I do think there's something, even if we can't 100% be certain that everything that is said is true. But I think we're getting a little bit nearer to what I think is some kind of true picture. And more will come, no doubt, a little bit later on.
Yeah, I agree. I just think there's a tsunami wave of evidence. There's a tsunami wave of momentum happening now. And like you said, I think we've gone a little bit too far and that there has to be something there where there's smoke, there's fire. It's just what does that fire look like? How much of
Mm.
the stories that have kind of leaked out throughout the decades are true? How much of that is distortions of what is true? My feeling is that we're going to get some more clarity on that as the years go by and when we have these firsthand whistleblowers come through, you have to look at them on the congressional level, like you said, because this is different than somebody in a pub telling you a story. This is on congressional record. They're under oath. If they're lying,
Mm.
there's repercussions. So it'll be very interesting to see what they say here in the upcoming hearings. One of the other things you kind of touch on is myth and lore and legends, because we have a lot of these strange stories going back into antiquity. And in those stories, we see common threads. How might these older stories kind of help to describe the modern phenomenon that we're seeing?
So, I mean, one of the things I do in the book is I wanted it to be mostly new stuff, but occasionally you've got to put it in context with what's already been said or a few famous cases and what the background to the paranormal is. So, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is the tales from largely medieval times, but I believe other periods of the dog-headed creatures. And these dog-headed creatures are described in a number of texts in more than one country. And I know there are some people that think that the dog heads were just a kind of a racial slur. It was a way of, describing people from other countries, but others are not so sure. And when you read the descriptions, you think, well, hang on, let's just consider for a minute, what if they did see dog-headed people? Because the assumption is, well, they were all, very superstitious back then. They believed in mermaids, whatever. But I do think you should sometimes stop and think, well, one should stop and think, well, what if it was real? Because if you look at, say, what's going on today at, say, Skinwalker Ranch, even if we believe only a third of some of the claims that are made about that, it does look like there are entities coming and going that are really weird indeed. And there's other places around the world where, there's tales of strange creatures being seen. And when you think, well, maybe those portals were there and open back in the medieval times or whatever, why can it not be the same thing? People still claim to meet dog-headed creatures today and many other weird kinds of creatures. So that's when I think you get this interesting crossover between eras where you realize, well, okay, what was going on then that we now dismiss as superstition? Actually, it's still going on now. And maybe in 1,000 years' times, they'll look back to what's happening now and dismiss Skinwalker Ranch as a superstition. But when you're here and now, you think, well, I think there's more of a case than that. So, yeah, there is crossover. Mythology and folklore, yes. I mean, what it tries always to do is give context to history and make something understandable and shape it in a nice, neat way. But it also, I think, does record realities if you can get down through the layers. And I do suspect that some of what just gets branded superstition, I think probably embodies some level of reality down there somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are these places like Skinwalker Ranch and other places around the planet where there seems to be high levels of paranormal activity happening there. There's data that's been collected. I'm sure you're familiar with Brandon Fugel and the television show, the Skinwalker Ranch show.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's kind of an unprecedented show where they're kind of showing it and is in as much real time as they can with entertainment value, of course. They have to kind of keep it.
Sure.
They have to keep it that way. It is a TV show, but there's more information coming out of that show, I think, than any other sort of paranormal show I've ever seen. And so it's really as transparent as you're gonna get, I think, as far as an entertainment show. And that's utterly fascinating. And that leans more towards the times that we're in. And I think everybody who has ever lived in a time period on the planet probably thinks that that time was maybe the most interesting time. But in this case, I think it really might be true this time because we have so many strange things happening. You've got
Sure.
you've got UAP disclosure, you've got, widespread distrust in government, you've got the rise of artificial intelligence. How do you see artificial intelligence playing a huge role in maybe putting a clear lens on the paranormal and these realities that we don't quite see so well? How does that play a role in this?
I mean, the last chapter of the book really deals with this because I wanted the reader to come out of the book with a sense of a true epilogue. It's like, okay, where's this all going? What is the future of paranormal research? And I look at that because I think AI, has many problems, as we know. It's likely to change the world in many ways that are good and bad. And at the moment, whether anyone's going to have a job at the end of 20 years is another matter. But anyway, that aside, it will also do incredible things when things like quantum computing become a little bit more available, and they believe it will. Calculation powers, the powers to process data is going to become extraordinary. It's going to be so fast, and things that have taken decades to get to, it'll be doing in seconds. This is the prediction, at least. And I think that's where you then have to have an AI platform that is actually open to all human knowledge where you just let it loose and say, is this real? Look at all the data. Let's take the paranormal as an example. Is there any level of reality to this? Now, at the moment, good example, if you do an AI overview on Google, it will tell you all crop circles were made by Doug and Dave, the two old jokers in 1991. And then it says, well, some people still think others are made by the weather. That is such a misrepresentation of actually what many people think. But that's what's now in the AI memory banks. If you can just blank all that off and say, I want you to look at this afresh, right? Forget that. And I believe that one day this will happen. It wouldn't surprise me at all if AI said, well, yeah, clearly there is something going on here that needs looking at. Look at this data. Clearly there are things flying around. People are seeing ghosts. They are having out of body experiences. and that's just clear from the stories you're going to read in Strange anyway, I think AI will come to its own conclusions. And then, and this is something I don't think has been discussed enough, maybe it will begin to work out how this might be happening. And when it has got to such a level that it can actually think a little bit more than we can, it might even work it out and go, well, that's how psychic forces work. This is how we interact with other dimensions. Hey, look, I can do it. And you might possibly have the first ever psychic computer. And then what? Others argue against that, and I put this forward in the book too, that no computer's ever going to be able to do that. Organic life alone can access the other spiritual realms. Well, we're going to see, I suppose, aren't we? But I think just that battle for, okay, what's going to work it out the best and when, it's going to be really fascinating. And in the end, I strongly suspect that if we survive the wave of AI that's coming, when we apply it in certain directions, it's going to actually help us understand what we currently call the paranormal realms a lot better in ways that at the moment we just can't process the data well enough or fast enough to do it. But I think a time is coming when we will. And that's really the conclusion of the book, which is watch this space. Because I think we're only at the beginning of paranormal research now. And I think what it's going to unveil is potentially, astonishing.
Yeah, sure. It certainly seems like we're right at the beginning of this. It's taken this long just to be able to feel like you're allowed to have the conversation. Whereas whatever disinformation campaigns were championed around the world, they seem to have been quite effective because, like you said, you have experiences of hardcore skeptics or people that are set in their ways, looking to get almost physical about
Yes.
about a point that they're making because they've been trained to think a certain way that's been reinforced with successes, and then they don't stop to question. And that can be quite dangerous. I think you need to leave some space for some openness to kind of contemplate, the what ifs. I think that you're better off kind of living in that sort of percentages so that you can learn new things. You don't ever want to be 100% closed. That's not a good thing.
No, well, that creates polarization. And I mean, in my previous book, The New Heretics, was all about the problems of polarization and ways forward that we can actually kind of go beyond that. Yeah, you're right. You do need to allow a bit of space of uncertainty where all sides can exist within that for a bit and hear everybody out. And the problem that we have at the moment, and this is especially true in the paranormal versus scientism realms, you just got people shaking their fists at each other across this chasm. And of course, that's true of most areas of society at the moment. That's one of the big problems, but we're going to have to sooner or later address that, stop doing that if we do want to get anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things one of these themes I wanted to bring up real quick is that how the paranormal sort of nudges humanity forward gently by having you ask questions and shake you out of your linear thinking, like we were just kind of talking about. I think the crop circle phenomenon absolutely did that for people that were open to it. It really opened their minds to other avenues of study, other thinking outside the box. Do you agree that we should prioritize the demystifying and resolving of these anomalies? Do you see that as a way to help? Well, let me rephrase this question. I want to go a different way with this. I think, and I want to know what you think about this. I think that these subjects can help boost STEM around the world in science, technology, engineering, mathematics by getting young people interested in these things. Because when I was going through grade school and high school in the 80s and 90s, this was not ever talked about. And as an educator, I can see how this could really get students interested more in the sciences. And I'll just say one more thing. I'll let you take it away with this. David Grush actually said this on the Tucker Carlson podcast. He said, this is how you boost STEM in the country. And I was really excited when he said that because I agree with that statement. And I think maybe that's one of the overarching themes of disclosures to help get our best and brightest minds thinking about these topics, because this might be the new sort of frontier of science and technology. How do you see these playing a role in that? Do you agree with this? What do you think?
I mean, I think that's one of the things that the congressional hearings are doing. Whether you believe everything that's being said or not, they are making people become more aware that things that have previously been dismissed are now being discussed a little bit more seriously. And already you can't You can't forget that's happened now. I know we got the factions, some want to shut it all down, and there's still some saying it's all balloons, but it's too late. I think that conversation now won't just recede. So what that's doing is making then people reconsider other phenomena that has perhaps also been dissed for too long. And a good example of that is the crop circle phenomenon. Now, I mean, it seems to be in twilight years at the moment, numbers wise. There's still some really nice ones out there, but it's not like it was 20 years ago, even numbers wise. And yet they've been rediscovered. So UFO podcasters, for instance, that previously wouldn't have gone near crop circles are now getting really excited about the good ones that we do have. And they're reappraising it because they now feel that their voices perhaps will be heard. And so crop circles are just one example of another thing that's been on the back burner for years, not generally very well regarded, even by paranormal researchers. It's come back up again. And now people are saying, well, hang on a minute, I think we should look at this. And they're getting out there and, Ben from Casper sites going out into the fields and actually examining them firsthand. That hasn't really happened for a while with genuine enthusiasm. So that's really nice to see. It doesn't mean that everything they're saying about them is right. And I mean, interestingly, one of the things I'm working on with my colleague Barry Reynolds, who's very much at the forefront of this, is trying to make available a lot of old crop circle information and data and reports that has been gathered over the previous decades. Because a lot of people don't realize that's there. And all that learning, all that accumulated knowledge, some of which has been stuck in paper folders and magazines and never made it online. It needs to be looked at because when you look at it, you go, whoa, there is such a case here. And we've now just launched the Crop Circle Research Archive website, or circleresearcharchive.com if anybody wants to have a look. It's very early days, not much on there at the moment, but the idea is to now gradually upload all of this because now there is a window. People are rediscovering it and they're coming to it. And we want to actually say, right, great, now look at all this. And you're going to realize there's a vast accumulation of knowledge there. And so the metaphor, if you like, there, or the spring off point from that is I'd like to see that happen with a lot of other paranormal research, whether it be ghosts or near-death experiences or psychic phenomena, whatever. A lot of that stuff has also been buried for too long, but we know there's huge amounts of data and research that has been allowed to be squashed. But now I sense its time is coming, and because of the UAP situation, people are reevaluating everything. And if there is some level of disclosure, even if it's not tomorrow, but in the next few years, that is just undeniable, of course, everyone's going to go, whoa, well, hang on, yeah, if you lied about that, what else have you lied about? And everything will then be on the table for discussion. And so everything that's been learned so far, this is the time I think it needs to be gathered, ready, waiting for that day, because I do think that day is coming.
Yeah, Andy Thomas, I really want to thank you. Your book is strange. That's the title. I don't mean the book is strange. I mean the book title is actually strange. You do a great job of weaving together a lot of stories and the commonalities between all these different paranormal activities, because that's one of the main things that gets missed in the UAP topic is that there are commonalities between different paranormal experiences, from communicating with deceased humans to psychic phenomena and to the UFO topic to crop circles. There are common threads to all this, and that's something I think that gets missed a lot. And I don't see a lot of people talking about that. You hear kind of glimpses of it here and there, but it's great to have a book where somebody's really hitting these points hard like you do. So I want to thank you for coming on the show. Go read Andy's book. It's a great read. And yeah. Oh, before we go, tell everybody how they can find you and everything else you got going on.
Sure. Yeah. Have a look at my website, which is truthagenda.org. So it's truthagenda.org. You're going to find out all about Strange there and where to buy it, all the usual places. And there's lots of videos there to watch, articles to read. So yeah, have a look at the website, truthagenda.org, and I hope you'll enjoy it.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Catch you next time.